It's just over a week until the NBA trade deadline, and it's clear the Pelicans need to make a move to vault them into contender status. Could they pry a guy like Mikal Bridges away from Brooklyn? What about other trade targets, including one from the Washington Wizards that you might not be thinking about? Is there anyone out there that could elevate them? Let's talk about it in a Wednesday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Wednesday, we're going to talk more trade targets here on Locked On Pelicans, including a big one y'all have been asking about, Mikal Bridges. What would it take? What's it look like? What would the team look like with him on the roster? We'll cover it all here. So thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team, whether it's the X's and O's and what happened in that loss to the Boston Celtics, good and bad with it. You know, it's not all doom and gloom there. I explained why. We'll talk a little bit more about kind of this roster and this team in today's show. Whether it's the X's and O's from that or the trade targets and things like that that are going on around the team. Again, a little over like 8 days till the NBA trade deadline. We cover it here. So make sure Locked On Pelicans is your first listen today and every day. And subscribe, become an everyday or listen Monday through Friday so you never miss an episode. So let's get into this one. A player that a lot of people have asked me about that makes a ton of sense for New Orleans, and that's Mikal Bridges from the Brooklyn Nets. Went over there in the Kevin Durant trade from a year ago. And, this guy's very good. Now, he's a year older than Brandon Ingram, but last year for Brooklyn, in just 27 games, averaged 26.1 points per game. Did it while taking 6.7 threes per, shooting it at 38%. Just very good numbers all around. On a bad team, he's putting up very good numbers. This season, they're a little more competitive here. 22 points per game, 5 rebounds. He's taking 6.5 threes, shooting it at 36.4%. Not an amazing number, but a respectable number. And averaging 3.7 assists per game. Also a steal per. He's very good defensively. Now, he's slightly shorter than Brandon Ingram, 6'6". But when you think about this deal, there's a reason I'm comparing him to Brandon Ingram, right? Is if you're going to get a trade like this done, the only way you do this is by including Brandon Ingram in the deal. The other thing with Bridges is basically plays as many games as possible. He played 83 games last year. 83. Got an extra game in with the trade. Played 82 the year before that. Played 72 the year before that, which was a shortened season due to COVID, right? And then played almost as many games as he could the year before that and played all 82 games his rookie year. There's some Iron Man-ness to him, I believe. So seeing him play in as many games as possible, he's missed 3 games or something in his career. It's very impressive number. Seeing that, certainly an asset for the Pelicans, right? He's a good three-point shooter, or good enough of a three-point shooter, 37.4% for his career. This is a guy who it definitely seems like could kind of just be your replacement for Brandon Ingram, upgrades you on the defensive side of the ball, maybe works a little bit better off ball. He's used to not being the #1 option from his time in Phoenix. All of that seems to make, I think, a lot of sense here for New Orleans if you're looking to make a bigger shakeup. Now, you could also expand this trade, and we're not going to get into the specifics of it, for a guy potentially like Nick Clarkson, someone I know a lot of y'all have been really interested in, though I don't think he's really going to be a long-term answer at center, and he's also due a lot of money coming up, so that wouldn't be great. But could you get another big like Dorian Finney-Smith, who is a pretty strong backup guy that you could bring off the bench, play limited minutes and see what he's capable of doing, even if at times he's kind of undersized as well. So I don't think it would be the best move, but these are all things to kind of consider with expanding a trade to try and remake this Pelicans roster just a little bit. So as I said, you need to include Brandon Ingram in this. You're not going to be able to get this done for like Dyson Daniels, something else in picks. You might even need to do Brandon Ingram and Herb Jones in a deal like this. At what point does the deal get a little bit too rich for the Pelicans' blood? And that's kind of the question here. Brandon Ingram in 2 first-round picks, 3 first-round picks. You could convince me on all of that, especially if you don't really think Brandon Ingram should fit long term. And I think there's open questions about that right now with the shot profile and some of the stuff that we've talked about. Though I thought he played relatively well against the Boston Celtics and fit into the flow of the offense, taking 8 threes, which hadn't been doing the previous 2 games. If he's taking threes at that number, I don't think you necessarily need to do a deal like this. But moving on from Brandon Ingram, bringing in Bridges is something that's also going to help the Pelicans long-term with their salary cap. That could be worth those extra picks and worth making a deal like this happen, right? He's due only $21.7 million this year, $23.3 next year, and $25 million the year after that, right? Like that's lower than what Brandon Ingram's going to be. That's a year longer than what Brandon Ingram has on his contract too. And he's a guy that you could argue might fit if you want to pivot to point Zion more, better than Brandon Ingram has shown us so far. So you reduce the potential hit on the luxury tax. That number's coming in a little bit lower next season than the NBA originally anticipated and communicated to teams. So that's something that the Pelicans need to be aware of. So when you think about it, it makes a ton of sense. But I'm going to ask you, would you include Brandon Ingram and picks for Bridges? Because that's what it would take to make something like this get done. If you do that, you are pivoting to point Zion, right? Like that's what you're here to do. Bridges working as a secondary creator off of him, kind of the idealized role that I, and a lot of y'all envision for Brandon Ingram too, that doesn't really seem to work a ton right now. So if you get Bridges kind of in that role, I think, hierarchy has been an open question for the Pelicans this season of who's your number 1, who's your 2, who's your 3, 4, 5, and so on. 3 is CJ McCollum, right? That's obvious here. And he's embraced that role. 4 could be a guy like Valanciunas, could be Trey. It just kind of depends on what you need that night. It comes down to who's your first or second option. And as we've seen the Pelicans offense really go through struggle times, I don't even know what I said there. I was going to be like struggle city. None of this makes any sense. As we've seen the offense struggle in the second half of games as they don't score points, they're not defensive. This fixes it, right? It fixes your hierarchy of put the ball in Zion's hands, let him create, try and shoot open threes, be a secondary creator when that option is taken away. Bridges, cool. He's going to be fine with that role. You get CJ there too. And then since he's giving you the defense, you're not losing anything on that side of the ball and in fact upgrading there because he is a good defender. Now, I think Brandon Ingram has been trying much more and having his best defensive season as a pro. But when you start to weigh in that Bridges is an upgrade there, he's going to probably shoot more threes than Brandon Ingram will. And he's cheaper. It might be worth some of those picks that are losing value, not by the day, but have, right? Those Bucks picks and things losing value. That Lakers pick could be very valuable. They seem to be a mess right now and maybe need to consider a head coaching change. So you've got to try and find the right balance of this. And I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I would definitely call Brooklyn and see if this is something they'd be willing to entertain. I think it would be a lot. I think Bridges could go for a lot around the league, and that's going to drive up the price. What's too much? Let me know in the comments down below on YouTube. So let's pivot to the Washington Wizards. Guy that I've long liked that I think could make a ton of sense for the New Orleans Pelicans. But when you start to look at some of these other trades, things get a little bit complicated. I want to talk about that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about eBay Motors. Our partner at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. So whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you with players that are guaranteed to fit your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us this week in eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Let's go with Josh Hart here. Hart should be a big winner due to the Randall injury and could be seeing gigantic minutes for multiple weeks here. We know that Randall is going to be out for weeks, not months, but Josh Hart seems to be the guy that is going to get the biggest increase there and biggest role. So Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. I work on all my cars. I actually drove the Corvette to work the other day, which was really great. And it's running because it's got new parts in it, a new master cylinder from eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts for your vehicle, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, of your money back. And at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your vehicle on the road over at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team, whether it's the X's and O's or trade targets that make sense that could upgrade the Pelicans roster here. That's why we cover it all on Locked On Pelicans. Become an everydayer. Listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. For your second listen, Ross Jackson's over at the Senior Bowl. New QB for the Saints, maybe, please? He's going to be breaking down everything black and gold, giving you the boots on the ground perspective from Mobile. Go subscribe. Make sure Locked On Saints is your second listen today. So let's get into more trade targets for the Pelicans and kind of talk a little bit about team building and looking at some of the salaries and things here. So a guy I want to highlight is someone that I've liked for a while and I think is having a very good year that could be a useful piece for this Pelicans team here if you're looking to just basically take tools away from Willie Green. Willie Green loves guys like Najee Marshall. Look, I like Najee Marshall. We like Dyson Daniels. We like Jose Alvarado. But at times you don't need to be running some of those guys out there with some of the shooting that they give you, and they're just focused too much on defense, and you need just something else, right? I've been saying, and a lot of people have been saying, like, you just simply need guys that are going to go out and score. And so you've got to give Willie Green those kind of players or take away ones that he's going to play too much. You know, something to consider with Najee Marshall, too, is that he's going to be a free agent after this season. And so he's not likely someone that you're going to be looking to give a big money contract to, given the Pelicans are really close to pushing the luxury tax already. And, you know, again, made a move just to dump Kyra Lewis Jr.'s contract. So you need to think a little bit long-term with some of these deals, too. It's one of the reasons why I think they're looking to upgrade Jonas Valanciunas. He's a free agent. He could walk for nothing. That's not an ideal situation for the Pelicans at all. You know, if you lose him in his $15 million, you can't just spend $15 million and get someone to replace him. You'd be spending less. That's a problem, right? So thinking a little bit long-term with some of these contracts is something that's probably on the front office's mind. Enter Corey Kispert from the Washington Wizards. Under contract this year, $3.7. He's got a team option at $5.7 million for next season. You know, when you look at that, that's a guy that's got one more year left on his deal than Najee Marshall does. You also have the ability to trade Najee Marshall and bring him in without going into the luxury tax. That's something that I think is really worth looking at right now. Kispert, I thought, was one of the best shooters coming into that draft, same draft as Trey Murphy. He's taking over 5 attempts per game, 36.4% from three. It's not an amazing number, not bad, but last year on 5.2 attempts, he shot 42.4%, 11.2 points. If you just need someone that's going to come off your bench, make some threes for you, and not be like solely a defensive guy that doesn't give you other things, Kispert really could be your guy here. You know, he's not an elite rebounder. He's not a bad rebounder. He's not going to make some of those hustle plays that Najee Marshall will. But if you need to kind of focus offensively, this could be the upgrade that you need. You'd probably need to include some sort of first-round pick in this, which might be a little steep, but it's also, again, kind of managing your head coach, who definitely skews way too defensively, and they need to kind of go more offensively. So here you're taking away something that doesn't really work, you think, and giving him something that will, and given some of the roster that you have, like, you got to play these guys. So I think Kispert could be a guy that they go after. And given that Washington is going through some weird kind of rebuild and who knows what they are, they're very directionless. They've already kind of moved on. They've essentially fired their head coach too. That makes a lot of sense that they're just looking for a completely fresh start with everything. So Kispert makes sense. A couple other guys I want to look at that I just can't figure out a trade that makes sense for. And they kind of are two guys that fit in the same vein. I've said they need maybe another ball handler. I don't need him in the starting lineup. I'd like him to come in off the bench. And I'd like that person to pair with Brandon Ingram. Again, I think we kind of know at this point, like take the ball out of Brandon Ingram's hands a little bit, make him work a little bit more off ball is maybe going to be the best option for him. He needs a point guard, I think, to play with him that would help. He can still handle the ball and run a lot of it too, but having someone else would be a good thing. So I think you could anchor some units of Brandon Ingram and another point guard along with whatever three other guys you want, and they're going to be able to play off one another, and I think that can elevate that unit. You know, we've looked at Tyus Jones, did a whole show about him or a segment about him with the Washington Wizards. If you're an everydayer, I think he's a perfect fit. But at $14 million, it's a little bit tricky unless you're sending out Larry Nance Jr. and like then you're kind of lacking at the big man spot. So when you start to look at some of these deals, like things just don't make sense, right? Trading a big for a guard won't really work. You need to kind of go like for like, I think, to find a deal that would work perfectly. And then not create another hole that the Pelicans need to go and plug. And that can be, you know, not an easy thing to do with limited time remaining to make moves and trades and all of those things. You know, it goes the same for a guy like Jordan Clarkson and Malcolm Brogdon. I think both those guys make sense. You know, I don't hate the idea of kind of like a lightning in the bottle scorer off the bench that Clarkson is. Like he makes a ton of sense there with all of that, right? Let him come in with a second unit and just go cook teams. This team doesn't really have a guard that gets downhill and attacks like that while also shooting threes, which is an important thing. You know, Brogdon is kind of the consummate floor general. He's on a rebuilding team in Portland who's 14-33. You know, they would certainly love, you know, more assets, I think, and to kind of open the door at the guard position just a little bit more for them. Even though Brogdon started to come off the bench, he's averaging 16 points per game. You know, he's shooting 42% from three. You know, at 31, he's a very good player still. The problem is these guys make like $22, $24 million. And I don't really see how they can swing a trade without including like Larry Nance Jr. and Dyson Daniels for Malcolm Brogdon. That then just creates a whole host of other issues for this team that you then need to go and solve. You're not going to get by with just Jonas Valanciunas and Cody Zeller. And then what happens if Jonas Valanciunas walks at the end of the season? This is why maybe the Pelicans need to have some sort of like agreement in place, or should, maybe they do, who knows, with Valanciunas on like a next contract or an extension or something like that. You know, again, I don't know what JV's market is necessarily going to be this offseason. There's not tons of teams with cap space or anything like that, so that creates a little bit of an issue there. But it's a risk. And if he walks, you're left with a huge hole on this roster that you just can't fill, and that's going to be a long-term problem, I think, for this Pelicans team. So when we look at deals, that needs to kind of factor into the calculus too. I think that's one of the reasons, other than maybe they just don't think JV fits, that they're looking at the center position. But I wouldn't do anything that makes this team worse, right? If you trade Valanciunas for Brogdon or Clarkson or whatever, you're worse in the short term because you're missing that piece, and I don't want to see this team do it. That's why I think one of the best moves for them to make is no move, right? I think the best way, the easiest way they can get better is internally. They're, again, not even coming close to reaching their potential, their ceiling. I think that's somewhat of a good problem to have if you eventually can reach it. I'm not sold that this team can reach it right now, given some of the coaching issues and things that we have seen. But we've seen growth on that side too. It's just not happening at the speed that we would like. But trying to make some of these trades, again, I don't see how you make a trade for Brogdon or Clarkson that makes sense, as much as I would like those guys on this roster and think they would really help this team. But we'll find out. So, do you have a trade you want to see the Pelicans make? Let me know on Twitter. It's @NolaJake. I'm going to grade your trades here on the show. We're going to take a bunch of them. I'm going to give them grades on realistic, if I think this is an upgrade for the team as well. I'm curious what y'all are thinking. I've seen some really funny ones, interesting ones. Someone traded for LeBron James. Sure, why not? We'll talk about all of that probably on Friday's episode of Locked On Pelicans. It's a game day for the Pelicans. They take on Houston. We'll recap that on Thursday's show, and then we'll get into what they need to be doing more at the trade deadline and kind of gear you up for the weekend and everything as the Pelicans continue this road trip here. So game tonight, recap Thursday, Friday show with a game on the road against the Spurs. That's kind of the plan the rest of the week here. So subscribe to Locked On Pelicans. Coming up next, Dyson Daniels, Jordan Hawkins getting some love over All-Star Weekend. Well, anybody else? Let's talk about it here on Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about LinkedIn. At the start of the new year, every small business owner is asking themselves the same question. What's the one move I can make that'll take my business to the next level in 2024? LinkedIn Jobs knows that your success all depends on the team that you surround yourself with, and that's why LinkedIn Jobs has created the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, making it the best place to hire. And hiring is easy when you have that many qualified candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. You're going to be able to hire quicker, get people on your team. Your business keeps going, not kind of having inefficiencies or potentially even losing money. So LinkedIn also knows that small businesses are wearing too many hats right now, might not have the time or resources to hire. And that's why LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. We are here Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We get great guests in, guys like Will Guillory. We'll have some others on the show. Reached out to Antonio Daniels. We'll see if we can get him on here pretty soon as well. He's a friend of the show, makes regular appearances. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube as well. Become an everydayer and listen Monday through Friday. There you go. Tell a friend about the show too. That'd be cool. So let's switch gears from talking about the trade deadline. There's a lot. Again, if you have a trade, let me know on Twitter. Send me a screenshot of your trade machine. We're going to grade them. I'm going to give you a grade on your fake trade. This is going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to doing the show. That's going to be the Friday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Dyson Daniels, Jordan Hawkins, named to the Rising Stars game. It takes sophomores, it takes rookies, and it takes G League players. But somebody kind of got a fun mismatch of everything to just have some of the new up-and-coming stars, again, rising stars of the league out there. These are good honors for both of these guys. You know, Dyson Daniels was in it previously. Jose Alvarado won the MVP of it as well. This is a very cool thing that can kind of put you on the map and raise your profile a little bit, right? It's also an opportunity for these guys to showcase that, like, we're better than some of these other players, I think. I don't think anyone's making, trade decisions, and it's after trade deadline anyway, based on this. But it's always nice to see a Pelicans rookie and Jordan Hawkins maybe going out there and playing better than some of the other rookies that were taken before him. And as a shooter like this and going to get opportunities to shoot, some, not tons, he has an opportunity to go and do that. He also has an opportunity to go get some valuable experience playing with those guys. Seeing their hunger, I think, is something that he can bring back to this Pelicans roster a little bit. And maybe it helps him get more minutes with head coach Willie Green, because his minutes have been up and down, playing just under 10 minutes against the Boston Celtics, right? So if he can kind of go and has a good showing, I wonder if that can kind of boost his stock here internally, which is something that we want to see with this Pelicans team. We want to see him getting more minutes, playing more, and doing all of that, because having a shooter of his level and ability, pairing him with Zion Williamson, is only going to be something that helps this team, especially long term. So trying to strike that right balance of winning now and development is important, and you don't want to see anything that stunts his growth. So him maybe getting this gets it through to head coach Willie Green that, like, yeah, this guy's good. We got to play him, right? Like, he's getting notes taken on him around the league. Dyson Daniels is also in this. Again, he's very good defensively. We didn't talk about him probably enough in that, in the recap show after the loss to the Boston Celtics, where he didn't take a shot attempt, and he definitely needs to find more offense and develop some confidence there, because he does not have that. But man, you look at this guy's defense and it's good. He played some excellent defense on both Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, two of the more elite players in the league, right? Tatum's kind of always in the MVP conversation as that like final guy, maybe to get votes. Jaylen Brown is, pushing all NBA and all of those things. For him to go out and kind of shut those guys down, it shows that, he's NBA ready. And I don't want to call him elite yet on defense, but he is very, very good on that side of the ball. The deflections, the steals that he gets elevates the Pelicans offense by creating fast break opportunities for him. And this is not going to favor him. The Rising Stars game is not going to favor him, right? It's all offense. No one plays. You think there's no defense in the NBA in the regular season. There's no defense during the All-Star game or the Rising Stars game either. So this won't really showcase his talents. If it looks like he doesn't have a good game, misses some shots, doesn't have a big role, that's really why. Like, you're not going to play lockdown defense on any of these guys. Just no one wants that. Let him go and score. Don't risk injuries, things like that. But it's nice to see that they're getting kind of noted in this. It speaks to the Pelicans' depth, speaks to some of the, sustainable growth, sustainable winning, hopefully, that David Griffin wants with this team, with this franchise as well. So it's cool to see them in the All-Star weekend festivities in Indianapolis is where it is. Now, I don't think you're going to see any other Pelicans in there necessarily, right? Trey Murphy's not going to do the dunk contest again. He thinks he was robbed. He was maybe robbed. And doesn't want to get in there after last season. I think that turned him off from everything. Could be in the three-point shootout, but going through a slump right now, that's certainly not helping things. CJ could get into the three-point shootout if he wanted, but I don't know if these guys really care, if they just want to kind of take a break, heal up, and rest. I don't think you're going to see Zion Williamson or Brandon Ingram named to the All-Star reserves. They're just kind of having like slightly down years, even though they're on a winning team. But, with how well CJ's playing, BI playing at times, and then Zion playing at times, they're all kind of like canceling each other out a little bit. So I don't expect them to be named to the reserves. The starters have already been announced. So there you go. Might just be kind of a Rising Stars weekend for the Pelicans at the All-Star game. I'm okay with that. Just take some rest, get ready for a strong second half push. The February schedule looks very favorable for the Pelicans outside of like really one or two games. So maybe we can see them make a run, which is why maybe they don't need to make a move. But if you've got a move you want to see the Pelicans make, let me know on Twitter at NolaJake. We're going to grade your trades on Friday's episode. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. Thank you all so much for listening. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You want Bridges? Let me know in the comments down below. What about Kispert? What about Brogdon, Clarkson? All of those guys. Let me know. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube as well. Become an everydayer. And I'll see you all tomorrow after the game. We'll probably do a live show after the Rockets game and just kind of do it live, hang out with y'all. So see y'all, depending on when you're listening to this, later tonight.